Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Fourth Tier Fever. Hope you guys are doing well. So here we go then. This is the start of the regular podcast that you probably see, not just with one person. We're back doing the managers ranking for 2025-26. I know that we did this last year. It got quite a bit of traction. It was like over 2 hours long. So we're hopefully not going to be doing that again. We'll try and keep this one at a minimum. Make sure we try and get our points across very quickly. But before we do start this podcast and meet the two people that are beside me, make sure you hit that like button on YouTube. Subscribe if you're new around here. Make sure you go and download the podcast wherever you get your podcast from. Big things coming. We've got another transfer roundup probably coming between Sunday or Monday. And we should have our predictions coming your way next week. So stay tuned for that. Right. Okay. We're here with Luke and Keiron. Yes, it's been a while, boys. How's pre-season treated you? Have you been active? How many runs have you been on? Have you done anything?
I mean, I've enjoyed watching Aaron Collins score a hat-trick in 5 minutes, if that's what you're talking about.
Keiron, how have you been?
Yeah, been all right, man. Taking a little break from football, truth be told. But yeah, I mean, kind of ready for it to come back now, man. I don't know how people live without football for 2 and a bit months. It's difficult, man. Don't like it.
Yeah, I can understand it. I think when you're in those months between May and June, and there's no football on, especially if you've got a girlfriend. Like, do you want to go shopping on a Saturday? I know that feeling.
I was about to say, is that something you've ever had to worry about, Jordan?
Not particularly. I don't really know where it's going, but
the Lionesses have still been on. There's still been football. Come on.
They've just about got through. Just about probably the worst penalty shootout in human history.
Lucy bronze. That's all that matters. Come on.
How did they do against Wales?
Yeah, how did we do against Wales, Keiron?
I don't remember, man. I turned it off at half-time.
Anyway, right. League Two managers, we're back again. There's no Nigel Adkins to get involved this time. We've got a fair few of them were from last season. We've got a fair few new ones. We're doing this slightly differently this year. Still pretty much in the tier list, but I think we had like different categories, like unproven. Last year was a lot of them was like meh. We're just keeping it simple with just A, B, C, D, and E. We're just doing it with the 5 this time. Because I felt like looking at them, it's not like there's many. I mean, there's 1 or 2 names in which you're thinking, right, okay, what sort of experience has he got? I'm looking at Newport again for that one. But there's actually a pretty good core of managers in this league. So I think it'd be quite harsh, I think, if we did that. So as you can see now, not now, I don't know where that's gone. That is not gone well. There we go.
Hey.
We're always professional on Fourth Tier Fever. Welcome back, guys. Yes, we have the table here. We've done it in the sense of in alphabetical order from team manager. So obviously John Doolan's first for the manager of Accrington Stanley. And we've also ended up with Matt Sadler at the end, obviously the manager of Walsall. Look, A, B, C, D, and E, 24 managers. Let's get into it. John Doolan. I'm leaving you lot to discuss first before I make my mind up.
My instinct would say towards the bottom end. I know he's only really managed Accrington, and I mean they haven't exactly set the world alight, have they? I don't want to be too harsh because Accrington's squad wasn't necessarily the strongest anyway. So benefit of the doubt in some regard, I'd lean towards a D. I want to say.
Yeah, I think I'd say I can't speak English. That's a good start. I think I'd say the same, just off the basis of wasn't spectacular last season, was it? I think there's a bit of a worry going into this season if you look at their overall transfer business. But based on the fact you kept them up at bare minimum, probably a D. I think you could maybe make an argument for maybe a C, but D is just the obvious call there.
Yeah, I probably agree. It looks like we all expect this to be another tough season for Accrington. We know what's been going on behind the scenes. I think the biggest indication that you can maybe get of Accrington was it their academy that got shut down. I think that was probably the big thing that I've noticed in terms of where they are financially. In terms of the squad, doesn't look great. And there's a lot of people, from the stuff I've seen from the early League Two relegation shouts, that's putting them towards the bottom of the table, being one of those relegation favourites. And to be quite honest, it's hard to argue. I think he did okay. I think he did well to keep them up last year. There was a couple of teams worse than them in the end. Will that save him this time? I don't know. I mean, I think we all sort of saw Morecambe sort of failing last year. Carlisle sort of came out of the blue a little bit. But even then, I think we sort of predicted Accrington to not do that well last year. But like I say, he kept him up. I don't think, and I think for that, I think he does deserve a tad bit of credit. I don't think he's the worst manager in the league, not by a long shot. But I can't really argue really any higher than a D, to be honest. I don't know. It looks like a tough old season coming again for Appleton. It'll be interesting to see if he can do it again. I think it's got to repeat itself. If we're having this discussion next year, maybe he would get that C. Who knows? So certainly one to look out for in that regard. One of the new boys, Barnet up next, Dean Brennan. Now, personally, this is a manager I really like. Obviously, Barnet absolutely romped the National League last season, deservedly promoted, and by judging by some of their transfer business, I know we'll be looking into the whole the whole transfers that teams have done at the end of the window, where we'll do our rankings there. Barnet have recruited very well, personally, and I can't see them being much of a pushover at all. If anything, I think they'll be right and knocking on the door of the playoffs. I really do believe that. And with someone like Dean Brennan, that's a very exciting prospect to have. I think it's probably a little bit under. I don't think he's been really much in and around the EFL, but this is his time to shine. It was sort of a bit like Andy Woodman last year. I feel that sort of vibe with that, but maybe more excitement with this Barnet squad. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I'd say that's a reasonable assessment. He's definitely an exciting manager, and he's bringing an exciting squad into the EFL. But the concern with me is what you touched on there, just the lack of EFL experience. He's one of those that, until I've seen him do it in the EFL, I don't want to say much higher than a C, just because I've not seen him do that at League Two level. And that is purely the only reason I'd have him that low personally. Is it's one of those with one season and he does well with Barnet, he'd be straight up into B or potentially even A, depending on how well they do. But just based on his experience as only being in non-league, I'd have to stick him in C for now personally.
So I've just opened up his Wikipedia. He's been at Hemel Hempstead, Billiarchy, he's been at Kingstonian, Wealdstone, and then Barnet. So this will be, to my knowledge, his first touch within coaching in the EFL. Now, I agree with Luke in the way that, the one thing that potentially puts you off of grading him any higher than a C is his lack of EFL experience. Yeah, I'm going to make the counter argument of, I don't think the jump from the National League to League Two is as big as people think. We've seen it with the teams that have went up; they usually thrive. You look at Chesterfield, and you look at Bromley last season. Both pushing towards those playoff spots. I don't think the gap's really that big. I feel like if you were to put that bottom half of League Two into the National League, they'd struggle. I don't think there would be an overall massive gap between the two divisions. So I'm going to base it off of that. I'm going to base it off of, I don't think the gap's too big, and just based on the project that he's built with Barnet since joining that club in 2021, the business that's come into it now, I'll lean him towards B personally. I just don't. I understand the argument of he's not managed too much, but he's never managed at this level. But I just don't think the jump's that big.
No, I agree with you there. I completely get it, because didn't they win the league by 100 points last year? They absolutely, and they beat a very good York side to it as well.
Oh yeah, they were comfortably up there. I think my one concern is just I don't want to rank him based on something I've not seen from him yet. I'm expecting Barnet to do well, but I can't actively say, oh yeah, they've done well in League Two, because they haven't yet.
Yeah, and that's sort of my thinking. I think now I'd put him as C, but I think he's very capable very quickly to jumping up to a B. I think there's probably one that will make that jump up very quickly, especially if things start well. Because like I said, I think Barnet will have a very strong season. There'll be no threat to going down. I do think they'll be... I do think they'll be in and around the top 10, and the way they've recruited and the way that they've pretty much already set up, I won't be surprised if they're knocking on the door of the playoffs. I really believe that with them. And he's got a bit of character about. I remember the interview he did. Remember last season, like, he wanted a bit of character. Sort of went semi-viral in a way. So that's the sort of manager. That's the sort of fire in the belly that you want from a manager. He seems like a really top bloke as well, and a very good manager to boot. And I'm really excited with his prospects. Andy Whing for Barrow. I think he's just solid. He came in at Barrow, did all right. He sort of did what he needed to do last year, which was sort of halt the run that Barrow were on, and they had some pretty good results at the end. Made a lot of transfers. I think they've got a big key players this season, but we're not really ranking it on that. I'm justifying him. I can't really justify putting him higher than C at the moment. But again, he's still relatively new to the league. I can't really justify it any higher than a C, to be quite honest. But he's a manager I do like.
It is a tricky one, to be fair. But I actually was thinking more towards B, just because I'm like looking at that Barrow squad. I wasn't necessarily convinced with them last season, but he steadied the ship there with a bunch of players I'm not convinced by, and he's done a reasonable job with them. And that's what I'm talking about when I say that League Two experience comes into play. Yes, he hasn't had much yet, but from what I've seen, he's done a decent job with not as many resources or as higher quality players as he'd probably like. And for that reason, I'd probably lean slightly towards B.
That is a good argument. I think he's very similar in the ways to your David Artells of this division, in the way that I could see if he sticks at Barrow for long enough, I feel he could build a really convincing and really promising League Two side. However, my argument is at the minute we're a little bit early into it. Yes, he steadied the ship. He got them away from any sort of trouble, but at the same time, did he wow? Maybe not necessarily, but again, as Luke's mentioned, they didn't have the greatest side on paper anyway. But you can look at sides on paper. And do we want to talk about MK last season, Luke? When we talk about looking at sides on paper,
we'll pass on that.
Rewind all the way back to last season. Every time we were going on, right, okay, MK have lost again. Ha ha, Luke. Your team is dreadful.
Yeah,
I'm coming back here this season.
I have a feeling I'm not going to be doing that too much this season.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, right? Like, I can see the argument for B, but I think my argument, and this is almost me contradicting my justification on the last one, is I think you can really make anything out of any kind of team. The fact Harrogate, for example, without a lavish squad, have stayed in the EFL for so long, I'd put him C. But I think he's another one of them that in a few years' time can easily be a B, maybe pushing towards an A. I think he's very much potentially a project manager in that sense.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of you. I think for my justification, I need to see more. I need to see more, really. And that will obviously come with time. I know he's only been there a few months. Like I said, did the job that he needed to do. I want to see how it progresses. And then we'll look to reassess it at a later date. That's it. It could maybe be another Dean Brennan in sort of that sense. But I just want to see a little bit more before. Because I think C to B is actually a little bit of a jump, actually, for him. But, that's just my impression I get from it. Was you gonna say something?
No, it's difficult. It like that jump from B to C up to what we've said now is very much off of experience.
Think about it. Dean Brennan's in C. Yeah.
It's difficult because they're two different. in a way, they're two different, but they're two very similar managers in terms of how far they've went so far. One of them's absolutely romped the division below. One of them's steady to ship at a League Two side. So I think they're very similar in that kind of way. They're both ones that we're wanting to see more of, but they are easily able to push within that B bracket.
Mm-hmm. Let's move on. Darrell Clarke's up next, of course, a new manager of Bristol Rovers. Of course, we have history. Grimsby have history of that. I'm sure he's best friends with the people over at the Grimsby Telegraph. Print at you, naughty word beginning with B. I'll let you figure out what that was and what he said. But he's a top manager, isn't he? I think there's a very good argument that you can put him. I really do like him.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. He's got multiple League Two promotions to his name. He's got a non-league promotion to his name as well. And to put things into context, when we were without a manager after Lindsey, Darrell Clarke's actually one of the names I would have wanted before I was aware that Paul Warne was an option. And I think that kind of tells you everything with the caliber of sort of players, managers, that all the sort of personnel we're trying to bring in. If that's someone I would have been happy with at my club, I think for me, that just tells me Darrell Clarke should be an A.
I don't think there's any arguments. I mean, he knows this club far too well. I've got his stats up now, 246 games in his first stint managing Bristol Rovers, the promotion in that, over 100 wins out of that bracket. He knows this club well. He knows this division well. Some argue that it was quite harsh the way he got kind of dismissed at Barnsley, but to and fro, whatever in that retrospect. I don't think there's any argument, is there? He's a top manager for this division.
I remember when they reappointed him, it just sort of felt right. Because I know that they've had this period in which, they've struggled. They've gone through a few managers. They've not really settled. And that's probably why that they've dropped out of League One back into League Two. They need someone just to get them up on their feet again to, sort of rework themselves up again. And Darrell Clarke is just perfect. Like I said, knows the club inside out. Has had success with them before. It's just written in the stars, really. And like we're expecting. Well, I'm certainly expecting big things from Bristol Rovers again. They've built a very strong team, and certainly a side that look like they're going to be right up there. And he's the perfect man to take him up. Andy Woodman, friend of the channel, for a friend of Keiron. I think for that reason he's going A.
Forever best, mates. What I'm gonna do while you justify your point. Look, I'm gonna look at where we put him last season, because I'm having a feeling we probably put him in the similar bracket of, Barnett's coach. But I think we judged him last season based on the fact he didn't do too much in terms of he doesn't have that EFL experience. That's what we judged him on, and that's why we put him a bit lower. He's had that EFL experience. He's done well, not with the most massive budget as we found out from him. It's a B or an A. Take your pick. Maybe you lean it towards B because he's still relatively new to this division, but again, it's an easy argument for A as well.
I'm totally on the fence between A and B. That you've nailed that summary. It really is a tricky one because, as you say, he hasn't had the resources, and he's done it with, without meaning offence, a smaller side. But then again, it is only that one season. So does experience then play into it a little bit? I think just because I'm maybe looking at some of the managers coming up, I'd maybe lean just ever so slightly towards B, just because I have a feeling we could end up with a couple more managers than A, but that's kind of all there is to it in my mind.
Yeah, tough one. Very good manager. Of course, we've gone on for ages how good of an achievement he's done at Bromley. The success he's had there, and will probably continue to do. But yeah, I sort of agree with you on the sense of there might be more that have done maybe a little bit more currently, but like I said, he's one that's very capable of making that step up.
I've just had a look. Sorry for kind of butting in there. I've just had a look at where we put him last year. We put him in what the equivalent of this tier list is of a C, which is entirely justified. I think the name of that tier last time was Does a Job.
he does more than a job now. That's for sure.
He does more than a job now. And I'm looking at some of the managers, just how we ranked them last season. Some of them are going to be highly more up or highly more down. It's going to be a very interesting one. But no, I think you give Woodman another season. There's no reason under the way he manages a football club and the way that he kind of directs himself. There's no reason they can't push towards that top 7, potentially even get in there. If they get in there, given how small their resources are on paper and all this other stuff, at that point, I think you can easily push him into A. He's a top manager.
He certainly is. And at least he's got some of that little promotion in terms of the ranking that he's sort of gone up a little bit, but can easily go up a little bit more. Neil Harris, this is an interesting one because he's had some decent success at much higher levels, mainly with Millwall. And he was there quite recently before he went back to Cambridge for his second spell. There has been, there's been spells in which probably haven't really gone the best, like his time at Gillingham, and I know he wanted Cambridge long before he went back to Millwall. He's been a little bit hot and cold, I think, at times. And I'm really struggling with this one, I'll be honest.
Yeah, it's definitely a tricky one. I mean, if you're defining success as promotion, then his only promotion was back in 2017, which you rightfully said was Millwall getting out of League One through the playoffs. And that's quite a long time to go without getting a side up in that regard. I imagine Cambridge probably at least have ambitions of getting themselves promoted again at the first time of asking. But as you say, he's also had these dry spells. The Gillingham one does concern me, although I know there's a lot going on behind the scenes at that club, so maybe that's not the best example. But
was that pre-Gallancy?
Yeah, it was just before him.
Yeah.
Yes, it really is a tricky one. I think based on maybe this is too much recency bias, but I'd maybe go as low as a D, just between C and D.
So my question with it, I remember when he got dismissed at Gillingham, there were a lot of people, because if I'm not mistaken, they were in and around the top 7. I'm pretty sure it was when this takeover happened. So he was dismissed on the 5th of October, 2023. I'm pretty sure the takeover had happened at that point. And I'm pretty sure he was there from the 31st of January, 2022. I believe that was just before. So his record in that is very up and down for a number of reasons. But I don't know, there was arguments that he was unfairly dismissed. That he was getting results. They weren't perfect, they weren't glamorous, but they were there.
I do remember
when he went to Cambridge, they were struggling. Pretty sure at that point they were they were either rock bottom or they were second from bottom. They looked miles and miles away from safety. 5 wins, 3 draws, 6 losses in that time. For a team low on confidence, that's not too bad. The Millwall one, second stint, again, hot and cold, and then obviously went back to Cambridge. He's probably the most difficult one to put on this list, truth be told. And just because he's not in as recent as, the past 2 years, he's not really cemented himself anywhere. I'd probably say C. Yeah, just middle of the road. I can see the arguments for D, but I think the only reason I'm putting him at C is that he's managed at a higher level and done okay.
Yeah, that's sort of my thinking. I sort of think D is too low, but B is too high. Eventually, I think we'll somewhat get into that. Yeah, so I think C is probably about right at the minute, just very middle of the road. Yeah, I don't really know much more to say. Yeah, but I agree. I think you probably look at the managers on there. It's probably the hardest to go off, obviously, because what he has sort of done in his previous spells at clubs. Let's rattle through these ones very quickly. Mike Flynn's up next. He's not had the best few years, is he? Albeit he's probably one or two circumstances. Obviously, his spells at Newport, they're quite a while back now. I'm not sure.
2021 was October of 2021 was when he left Newport. So you're talking nearly 4 years ago.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much longer you can sort of cling on to that.
I don't think you can.
No, I don't think. No, I agree. I don't think he's I don't think he's that bad. I'd probably say.
You've got to settle on D. I think there's no. I don't think he's had the consistency anywhere. And to be fair, if you look at the way Cheltenham performed, they were one of the consistently inconsistent sides. And I know there's takeover problems there at the minute, but I'm looking at what's going on over there, and I'm not convinced again. I'm a little bit worried about what he's doing. I'm not necessarily convinced. I'd find it hard to put him much higher, to be honest, especially if you look at his sort of percentage win record across his across the clubs he's managed.
So I love Michael Flynn, right? In terms of personal bias and stuff, I'd love to put him A. And if this was a few years ago, you could argue that. Walsall, getting near enough 31% win rate over 68 games. Swindon, 33 games. That's a really short spell. 27%. Cheltenham up to now, 40% win rate. I think off of that, it's below a certain level. Obviously, Swindon have had their problems. Walsall had their problems during that. Cheltenham are currently having their problems. He's not been dealt the best of hands. But at the same time, while he was at Newport, we didn't have the biggest resources, and he got us, 2 seasons in the playoffs where we reached the finals. I think D is probably the fairest for him, but I guess you could say at most C, just because he's doing okay at clubs where off the pitch circumstances aren't exactly fantastic. But I'm not going to argue too much with D there.
I'll be interested to see what the takeover at Cheltenham does there in terms of his transfer, because I know that Cheltenham haven't really done a great deal at the minute, and the stuff that they have done does concern me a little bit. But again, that's a discussion for another day. Paul Cook's up next. I think he's A. I think he's a top manager.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue with that. He's got a number of promotions from various leagues over a number of years. And despite the adversity that Chesterfield faced with, the absurd amount of injuries they had last season, they still made playoffs. I think they're a team that I'd be worried about facing this season. And again, I'm saying that as someone who supports a team that signed Aaron Collins and Nathaniel Mendez-Lang. So, I think he's doing a fantastic job there. And I think Chesterfield are a force to be reckoned with. And a lot of that's down to him. Does
he want to mention how many players that they've signed that are really good on paper? On paper, let's just keep that. Let's keep that on track record. I'm pretty sure we put him top tier last season, and I don't think his kind of credibility has went anywhere down based off of last season. No, probably one of the easiest A's we're gonna give.
Yeah, and I think there were circumstances last year with injury, but they sort of rallied and got into the playoffs in the end, just fall short. But they're one of the favourites for promotion for a reason. I think with the squad that they've put together and the players that they've already had and which they've built on, they look a force next season. And I think that's putting that politely. Right, Danny Cowley, Colchester. He's again personally someone I don't really like, but I can't deny he's a very.
I wonder why you don't.
Yeah, it's nothing to do with his spell at Lincoln or even just now with the style of football he plays, and but I guess you've got to do anything to win, and this isn't a dig at Colchester or anything like that. I just don't like Danny Cowley or his brother. I think he's a tool, but I can't deny he's a very.
I think we're writing them off as guests if Jordan's the one to appear. Then well done, Jordan. The season hasn't even started yet, and you've ticked one off. Well in, man.
I'm just voicing my opinion.
I mean,
that's going out on the clips page. Well done, Jordan. Congratulations.
Great job.
I'm literally going to timestamp that this second.
Right. Anyway, should we get back on track? I do think they have to go pretty high up. I'd say Cowley. I'd probably I'd probably lean towards B. Obviously, that Lincoln spell is the one that everyone sort of remembers, and it's been a long time since then. But he's one of those project managers, and I've been. I mean, I was praising Colchester for so many times last season, and obviously they didn't quite make playoffs, but you can see what they're building, and I think they're continuing to build on that. It's one of those where if they had another good season, I'd move him up to A. But for now, in the middle of this project, I'd sit on a B.
You know what? I can't really argue with you at all there, Luke. I think his success at Lincoln very similar to Michael Flynn in a way. It was a while ago. They've had far from successful spells since then. I think in a way, this was a situation where they kind of, they're at a stable club. They know how to get these projects going well, and yeah, as of now, it's going swimmingly. And I think that's another team very similar to Chesterfield, where for maybe the right or wrong reasons, in Jordan's case, you're not really going to fancy playing them.
Yeah, they're horrible to play against, but you always expect that from a Danny Cowley side. Look, I think the biggest compliment I can sort of give of them, I haven't said really, I don't think he's quite A. I don't think he's quite at the level of maybe someone like a Paul Cook just. But I think the biggest compliment I can say was when he took over Colchester. I think I look at their attendances. I know there's only so much you can go off attendances, but they were somewhat dwindling a little bit, and they've had a couple of years, quite a while actually, where they've massively struggled. And Danny Cowley's gone in there, and he's just given the place a massive boost. I think you can sort of see that last season. The fans are very much on side. They're very much backing what he's doing, and yeah, they'll be strong again. They'll come again next season. I think they'll certainly be in the fight for the playoffs. And a big reason, genuinely, is down to him and his brother. They're very good. They know how to build a squad that's capable of doing bits. Let's say. Scott Lindsey's up next. Now this one's an interesting one. I think this year is a big year for him.
Has to be.
Well, yeah, it definitely is. But and obviously we can't ignore the miracle he pulled off previously with Crawley. But obviously at Dons, we've seen another side of him. And in our experience, he kind of alienated the players, including a club legend, and that made his time tricky here. He obviously is a very strong character, but I do also think it feels like at Crawley that the owners are almost working against him. They have this tendency to just get rid of the whole squad, start again, pretty much every summer, and they're just asking him to do yet another miracle. And if there's one thing we learned at Dons, he's not a miracle worker. So I'd actually probably go down the middle. I'd stick him in C.
I would argue that he is a miracle worker, because you look at Crawley. Absolutely nobody expected them back 2 seasons ago to get promoted. He managed that. He then joins a club for this division that have absolutely everything you need. Top quality players, incredible facilities, owners that back him, all this other stuff. And then he didn't go well. I almost feel he does better under pressure than he does when everything's stable and he's got all this, he's got all these issues going against him. I think fan expectation was a lot as well. I almost feel that was a big thing that kind of influenced how his time went at MK.
Is that not pressure though?
In a way, I think there's 2 different forms of pressure, because in the Crawley aspect, he's pressured by, as you've mentioned, the owners setting all the players. In terms of on the pitch and his squad, that's kind of the pressure he's got. Fan-wise, he had absolutely no pressure, because they were all going, all right, if we stay up, no problem. He then gets promoted. It's almost the opposite way around with MK. Everything on the pitch is stable. The fans expect him to get promoted. That's his issue. Will they now expect him to pull it off again? Is the question. Maybe. But I'd put him middle of the road. C, just because he's a very hot and then cold manager. He's done absolute miracles at one club with very little resource, and then he's had every single resource to his disposal and not done as well. Which is really weird how it works, really. Again, you'd think it'd be the opposite way around, but that's just how it's been for him over the past couple of years.
I'm just
In
curious.
his own words, maybe he just can't handle being at a big club.
No, don't start that rubbish.
Well, why would he be at MK if he wants to go to a big club? That's all I'm saying.
Hey, it was his words.
Look, I think if he can come, I say even close
6-3.
I say if he can come even close to replicating, it doesn't even have to be a promotion. Maybe just a top 10, maybe fighting towards a playoff spot. I think he could quite easily go in B, but I do understand the arguments for C. Like I said, I kind of want to see a little bit more, especially with what he can do with Crawley this year. Because again, they've not really fancied to do much, but that was the case, a couple of years ago when he was there. Let's sort of see what happens, and we'll sort of judge it on now. Obviously, his spell at MK didn't really go to plan, but I think a fair few managers have gone in there, and it's not really gone that way. So I do feel a little bit of sympathy for that, but can understand the arguments for them getting rid of him. But yeah, let's see how he does there. Right, Lee Bell. Look, this is a man that I've sort of stuck up a lot for. I think there's a good manager in there. I think there has been circumstances, the past couple of seasons, especially last year, as to why that they've fallen off the way they've had. They've had a fair few injuries. They've had a fair few injuries in pre-season this year. I think Joel Tabin is out for the rest of the year with what sounds like an ACL injury. I've always said that Crew need to start fast this year because I honestly do think his job will be in trouble if he doesn't, because obviously with how alarming that drop-off was, I think was overshadowed with how bad Walsall's was. Because it's quite different. Because look, we're looking at it because Crew are right up there. I don't deny he's a bad manager. He's clearly not. But I can't justify him being in B. I think because of that. I think he's just very C. I think you probably look at the other managers in C as well. I think he's sort of along those lines.
I was going to be a lot harsher than that. It's a result.
That's probably because, like I said, I do like him, but that's probably me. But I can maybe half understand the arguments for D, because I think you got to near the end of like last season, and a lot of the criticism which I saw from Crew fans was the football's negative. It's just dour. They weren't really scoring a lot of goals, and like I said, I think they need to start fast. But yeah.
Yeah, I don't deny that there is a good manager in there, but it's a results-based business, and his results have been regressing, as have Crew just as a club in recent times. I know they've had these whole injury concerns, but as you've then brought in there, it's also the tactics, and I think things are starting to get very stale very quickly. And I almost wonder if he's got too comfortable there, and he's now sort of stubborn in his ways of, right, this is how we set up, this is how things work. There's the old Karl Robinson quote from back in his early days of Plan B is just do Plan A better. I almost wonder if that's kind of the point that Crew are at with Lee Bell, and it doesn't work, and I think he's going to learn that the hard way. So as things stand, purely based off of recent performance, I'd actually be going as low as E.
I wouldn't go E. However, I can understand the justification for it in a way. I would say D, just off the basis of, as you've mentioned, Jordan, and as we saw last season, and as it's potentially become apparent, they have to start quick next season. They have to do well, or he's going to be in significant trouble. And we talk about understanding that Crew have had a lot of injuries, yet one manager who we put much higher had to deal with arguably more injuries last season in Paul Cook. He was able to understand these injuries and change tactics to suit what he had available to him. Lee Bell hasn't done that. Even watching them over the course of last season, no matter who they had injured, it was the same brand of football. It very much is that old Karl Robinson quote. And again, for that reason, I can see the argument for E, but I don't think he's that bad. But I think if he does not start well this season, and we were to do this in 5 months' time, I think you can very easily argue E. I don't think he's an incredibly versatile manager, but maybe he'll prove us wrong this season.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, I think he's harsh. I really do think that, because like I said, there has been good sparks, but there needs to be more often and more quickly, I think, with that. But I can't really argue with any of the points there. I know Crew likes to stick with managers, so it'll be interesting to see how they get on. I think recruitment-wise, they certainly need to do a bit more. I think I saw Lee Bell said that they want like 4 more players in before the start of the season, so we'll see where they get to with that. But yeah, I think the first few months in particular are big for him and they're big for Crew, because I know, like I said, Crew likes sticking with the manager, but if we've seen the same patterns going on again, which we saw for the second half of last season, where they were in that situation, it could get pretty negative pretty quickly, and I'd hate for that to be the case, to be quite honest. Fist pumps himself, Pete Wild. He's a good man. There's a good manager in there. This is a tough one. I think what do you think? Because I think, and I do like him, but is he justifiable of putting him B if you're looking at the two that are in there, Andy Woodman and Danny Cowley? At the minute, I'm not so sure, but I think, like I said, it's like another Dean Brennan. I think that's easily achievable, especially with some of the finances and the facilities that I think that Fleetwood have. I think they'll do all right this year.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, really. I think he's sort of that top of C bracket, could maybe creep into B sort of level. The real difference there is he's got a bit more experience, obviously, from his time at Barrow, and I think he did a reasonably good job there, to be fair. The thing is with Fleetwood, we're looking at them as a potentially promising side this season. It's just that we haven't seen it yet. We can't actually say, you know what, he's turned Fleetwood into a good side, because we don't necessarily know that for a fact just yet. So for that reason, I'd lean towards C.
Yeah, I think I'd lean towards C. Very similar to, weirdly, the current Barrow manager. I think he's at the beginning of a project there with Fleetwood. We saw how we built Barrow over the time he was there and how we made them click and progress into results. Very similar with the likes of, again, Barnett's manager, even Andy Woodman to a degree. There's an argument to put him into B for what he did at Barrow, but that was a little while ago. So
Yeah,
I think I think C is perfectly fair.
I also think if Barrow made the playoffs, because they had that horrible run near the end in which they fought out, didn't they? When they looked so comfortable pretty much all season, I think he might have had a good shout of being in B. But yeah, he's at the start of a project, isn't he? And there's, he's had League One interest, so there's clearly something there, and he's someone that I quite like a lot. I tell you what, if I don't like Danny Cowley's football, I'm not looking forward to this man's football when we play Gillingham next season. It's Gareth Ainsworth. Oh God, where did you begin with him? Obviously spent a long time at Wycombe. Obviously not the best spell at QPR. He's obviously gone in there at Gillingham. Had a relatively solid last few games. He steadied the ship, quite a lot of draws in that time. But we're looking at again, is this the year that Gillingham actually get their act together and actually be the side that we all expect him to be? Is Gareth Ainsworth the man to do it?
As much as I would happily create an F tier for him right now, I think I have to concede that he's a good manager, and I could see him actually doing a very good job of Gillingham. Obviously, he has had some losses in the past. His time with Shrewsbury was rough. His time with QPR was laughable. But he's done very, very well with Wycombe previously, and he's pretty much become the god of anti-football at this point. So I think B would be reasonable.
Yeah, I'm agreeing entirely. B in the way that he's more proven, and he's done well at Wickham. He's had that relatively stable start to life at Gillingham. They've had some, say this every year, don't we? They've made some good additions up to now, but I think if any man is to make a team full of exciting players somehow manage to click, it's a man who does exactly the opposite and plays the most boring football on the planet.
You've got a team of exciting footballers. You could be prime Barcelona at the minute. Under Gareth Ainsworth, you're not having any of that.
I think he's just a steady manager, isn't he? He knows the way he wants to play, and
he knows how to win.
Evidently, at this kind of level, it works.
Yeah. He knows how to win games, doesn't he? I think that's the biggest compliment you can take from him. Right. Okay, moving on. David Artell next. Now, I remember having this discussion last year. I think we put him in. Did we put him in B last year? I think we did. I think we rated him high up. I know how much.
I'm gonna have a gander at where we put him. We put him in does a job, same as the likes of Michael Flynn, Derek Adams.
Yeah. Oh God, how bad we got that one.
Andy Woodman. What a terrible ranking this was, by the way.
Jesus, that was awful. But I think that was more with me being on the fence that I sort of saw, in those first few months when he came in. I think if I looked at it then, it was like 80% of the fan base were unsure of him. I was still a little bit unsure, but I was more willing to back him. But now, I think we've had the season we've had done. We've been on the fringes of the playoffs. We've kept most of our team from last year, other than the odd player, i.e. Denver Hume. And all of a sudden, that 80% of people that were unsure about him are now rightfully behind him. He's got himself a new contract. We're just letting him grow, develop this thing. You can see what we're trying to do. There's an identity we've had. We're trying to do things. And one thing I've just noticed from him recently, just with interviews, and I sort of got this with him anyway, he just gets it. And I know it's an easy thing to say with managers. He just gets it. And that's what I love. He's so invested in the area, in the town, and the community, as well as how he does on the football pitch, which he tries to play the right way. He tries to play the pretty stuff, and and it's worked for him. Like I said, we've always discussed he's a builder. I think he's not quite A, not quite A. I think he's easy B. He's got to be.
He's a very similar story to Cowley in that sense. He's building a club up sustainably. And he's still in that growth phase at the minute. And obviously, Grimsby very nearly got playoffs last time out. I think this is the season where we're potentially looking at them potentially getting a bit more out of this coming season. But until we've seen the results of that project, I think it's a little bit hard to put him in A, as his last success in terms of promotion was a long time ago now, same as Cowley's. But he's still a very, very good manager, and I like what he's doing. So I think B is entirely fair.
I think the reason we put him in C last season is he was very early into the project. Of course, he had joined the steady and almost sinking ship, and he's done really well to build into this season. Am I correct in saying this is his second full season, but third if you count the little bit he had?
Yeah.
Obviously, the season prior to that. I think B for now, but I think, like Luke said, we're expecting something from Grimsby. He's had 2 full summer transfer windows. He would have had, if I'm not mistaken, he would have had 2 January windows. I think he joined after that window, didn't he? In that first stint.
He joined in November.
Ah, did he? I thought he joined later.
He was appointed on the Monday, and on the Tuesday was at MK Dons.
No, that's a perfect start for him, isn't it? He would have had 3 January windows, 2 full summer windows. I think, especially in his case, when you look at what he did at Crewe, I think that's a perfect amount of time for you to finally start seeing what he's been building over the past couple years. I see no reason why Grimsby don't do well. I see no reason why we can't be arguing A next season, but B for now, definitely.
Yeah, and I think, not to be disrespectful to Crewe, but I do feel like we have a little bit more in terms of what we can offer him for him to help make this project successful. Last year, been flirting with the playoffs, just missing out. As much as it was disappointing, it was a welcome sort of surprise. This season, it's what I expect, and I love the fact that we're going into the season with that. And I really hope this is it, because we've had too many false dawns as a football club.
Cue the 13th place finish next season, guys. Cue it.
We've had way too many of them, but I truly believe if we're ever going to get to League One, we're going to do it under him. Right, Simon Weaver, Harrogate, he's just steady Eddie, isn't he?
The most C manager we're ever going to give. Not many resources, barely keeps Harrogate up. Not exciting, but are Harrogate the size of an EFL club? Probably not. He's steady, isn't he? There's nothing more to say to him. I think there's a bit of a worry this season, but I think if anyone's going to keep Harrogate up, it's going to be him. Luke, here he comes, Mr. Disagreement.
Swing it out of the park. Anyway, I was going to lean slightly more towards the just because Harrogate were regressing a little bit last season. Again, I know the whole resource argument is there, but equally, we've got someone like an Andy Woodman up in B with equally few resources. I think this is very much a make or break season for Harrogate. I like a lot of the business they've done, and I'm actually expecting them to be a little bit better. So if they're not this time around, they'll be in a lot of trouble, put it that way. But obviously, I can't rank on that because, again, I've not seen it. But based on how they performed last season, I would lean slightly towards D.
I'm looking now. I can't actually see where we ranked him. The last time we did this,
should have probably got a picture up and showed it at the start.
We should have done that. Or for this podcast, God, we should use bigger images or more clear ones. I can't tell.
Right.
I can't tell whether he's in Mayor or whether he's in does a job, but in the equivalent, he's in between Mat C and D, which is what we're saying again.
If we're judging off that, he just very much does a job. Like,
do we have to talk about this blog?
Should we just put him A now?
Yeah, should we put him A and move on?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, silly amounts of promotions at levels higher. Done well in this division. Has a stupidly good squad.
Exactly.
It will be laughable if they. I'd almost argue it'll be laughable if they don't win the league.
If they don't win the league, they're going in it. He's going in E.
Yeah, if they do not win the league, he is E. Because there are absolutely no reasons you do not romp this league 100 points.
I mean, I have full faith in Paul Warne at this point. I love the way he's talking, what he's planning to build. You can see what he's trying to do, and that he's invested in this project because he's got a lot of control over it as well. And like you say, he's had a League One promotion every other season for the last 8 years. Track record speaks for itself. So let's stick him in A and move on, shall we?
Yeah, let's move on. And I don't really have much to say on David Hughes, I'll be honest. It's something I don't really know.
I really wanted you to say David Williams. I really wanted you to do it. That was my entire preparation before this.
Yeah, because you've been calling him David Williams. Is it David Williams you've been calling him?
Yeah, David. Yeah, I've been talking to a guy called David Williams, and it's really not helped me given the fact we recorded this on this day.
It was that bad.
The question is, where do you put him? Because you can't put him E because he's done nothing.
Exactly, he's done nothing. E.
Well, where else can you put him?
This is why I told you
you
should have changed that E because there's not going to be an E here. I get arguable there might be an E. There should be a tier that has said not managed a game in his life, and he should be in there.
As far as we're concerned, he is not a good manager until he proves it otherwise.
Hey, we're unbeaten in pre-season. That should be enough for you. Hey, get him an A.
Yeah, well,
get him an A.
Were you playing there?
Get him an A. We won't talk about that. Get him an A.
Playing a bunch of small sides with you signed a bunch of players I'm not necessarily convinced with. He has to have a good season.
Under a massive football club, I will not be having it. Western Supermare are as big as Barcelona.
Okay. Look, he's going in here for now. It might look a bit harsh, but until we actually see what he does,
can
go off what he's done. in the first team men's football. I know he's been at Man United. Yeah, great. There's some decent pedigree there to be a club at that stature, but we need to see him managing his own team, and there's not really anything to go off. So I don't know what you want me to do. So,
all right, can we end the podcast now? I'm fuming.
No, we're moving on to Martin Paterson, in which, to be honest, I'm quite.
Oh yeah, can he go? Yeah, he can go in here as well. Yeah, he did awfully at Burton. Did awfully at Burton. Then went out his field. That was awful. Yeah, moving on.
He's certainly a man with a point to prove, I think, after his spell at Burton, because that was dreadful. And some of the stuff he kept coming out with at Burton. I remember them on the final day when they beat Fleetwood. Oh, no, they lost to Fleetwood, didn't they? And they only just stayed up on by the skin of the team. I think, was it Cheltenham that lost to Stevenage, which meant Cheltenham went down instead? Like, he was celebrating on the pitch and all. And
hold on, did they played Fleetwood last season in League One? Did they, Jordan?
No, but Burton.
You've done it, yeah. But you've just said.
Oh, the season before. You know what I meant.
Either way, it wasn't good.
Yeah, it was terrible.
He was rubbish.
Yeah, I've got to admit, I've got
a clip of him messing. I've got a clip of him messing up. I'm happy with that.
Eyebrows were raised when he was appointed, so certainly a man that has got something to prove,
especially with a team that has underperformed over the past few years.
And it was a very much underwhelming appointment from a club like Notts County. So
I think underwhelming sums up just about everything that club is doing at the minute.
Underwhelming is proven.
Manager, even just their pre-season. To be honest, it's not a good look.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect word to describe how they've been since they got promoted back into the EFL as well.
It's certainly the word I'd use in the last few months, in particular.
So it's the word I would use since they joined the EFL again, being promoted with Wrexham. There was so much expectation for that team, yet every single time they've messed it up.
Yeah, there was, to be fair, but yeah, I'm going off what I see, and Martin Paterson, well, hasn't really done a great deal on what he has done.
No.
Micky Mellon, again, he's had very hot and cold spells. Of course, Oldham back in the Football League. Great to see them back. He's certainly a manager. You won't get relegated under him, that's for sure. I'm just not sure. I know, obviously, his time at Tranmere was very successful.
You don't need to mention it. Don't remind me.
No.
Don't remind me.
Yeah, Tranmere won at Wembley. Did you know?
Who do they beat, Jordan?
I wonder. Was it a late goal from? Was it Connor Jennings? Was it?
Yeah. After their opposition did everything in that game but score. I don't know who. I don't know who played them, to be honest with you.
I don't know. I'm sort of flirting in the idea of C and D. I'm leaning towards C.
C, yeah.
He's a good manager. There's a good manager in there.
Yeah, I'd say C. I was potentially even slightly looking at B just because of the pure longevity. Obviously, he has his hot and cold spells, which is probably what brings him down to a C. But the longevity of the promotions he's got over at least a decade at this point. Those are stats you can't really argue with all that much. So I'd say high C seems reasonable.
Yeah, I think you can make the argument for B, can't you, based on the promotions he's got at this level. But I think just off the basis of recency, I think C.
Karl Robinson, I'm thinking B.
Yeah, very similar to the likes of Artell, Cowley, project manager, seeing results with Salford. They've got weird new ownership and stuff as well, haven't they? So be interesting to see how that unfolds. They've had a decent summer up to now.
You've just taken all of my points in one go. Just another project manager where this is the big season potentially.
You're welcome.
Yeah, there could be big things coming Salford's way this season. I like how I've certainly liked what they've done. There's not really much more to say on it. Yeah, project manager, as we've mentioned. Yeah, and he's a pretty good one at that. Right, Michael Appleton's an interesting one. See, now at Shrewsbury, I'll be totally honest, other than that spell at Lincoln, in which he was given pretty much all those good players, like Brennan Johnson, Morgan Rogers, he hadn't really done a great deal. And I know a lot of that time has been spent in League One, but I'm really not sure on him. Truth be told,
D at best.
He's very.
I think he's got slightly better kind of experience and I suppose better fortunes than you Notts County manager, for instance.
I think
but he's not remarkable, is he? I think D is the highest you can give him.
I think for that reason, I would put him in D, mainly for that reason alone.
Yeah, well, I think it's hard to argue with that. Really, it's been a long time since he's had any real success. I'd say his career's probably been slightly declining. But again, you can see he's probably there's something there. So D's probably fair.
Right, Ian Holloway. To be fair, I wish I made a single section for him. To be honest, I've gone on this podcast how much I've not really the biggest fan of Danny Cowley in the world. You know what? I'm not even going to go there. You know my hate.
Oh well, now we've got Ian Holloway off the list.
He's done a very good job with Swindon.
We've got two now, haven't we?
He's done a very good job with Swindon. They recruited pretty well.
B again.
But I've seen it before.
Is it a B or is it a C?
I'd maybe go a C, just because if we're looking at the project managers above, I don't feel like Swindon are quite as far along their journey as of yet. And obviously, we kind of questioned the appointment initially just because he'd been out of the game for a long time, and he is starting to prove us wrong, to be fair. But we need to see that on a more long-term basis, in my opinion.
I can see that. I think my argument for B is the fact that he's coming to another sinking ship. Really, really big club that have had their problems off the pitch for a number of years, and if he would have been there from the start of last season, they'd probably have finished in playoffs, which I think, off of the basis of everything going on at Swindon, nobody expects. And I think based on this summer up to now, he can easily drive them towards that top 7. And I think that's my argument for B. But then I suppose your other argument is he's been out the game for so long. He's got so much experience, but that gap, I think, puts him down.
Yeah, that's sort of my thinking with it. I need to see another season of it, because I think it's very easy to somewhat get stuck in that trap. Like I said, I've seen it firsthand. Do I think it'll happen at Swindon? No, because I think it probably helps that we're not in a pandemic for one. But it's, like I said, I've seen. I'm not trying to knock it, because what he has done at Swindon is very good, very good. And if he was there a couple of weeks earlier, they might have made the playoffs. Play some lovely football. What I want, the football that I wanted his teams at Grimsby to play. I mean, we sort of saw that in the first few months he was there, but obviously when COVID hit, it all became a different story. But obviously we know about his success in the past and whatnot, but we're going 15 years ago now for that one. It's probably one which I want to see more of before I think probably deserves to make that jump. I think a C is totally fair. Andy Crosby,
C again.
I think he's C again. I don't think he's maybe as bad as maybe some of them on that. I don't think he's as bad as the likes of maybe Flynn or.
I think he's very similar to Holloway in a way. No, he's very similar in a way of he's not been there too long. Obviously, it's obviously very different in terms of experience.
I think the impact he's sort of made there has been relatively decent for what they needed to do. Obviously, they were playing much better. They were scoring a few more goals and picked up some big wins, which has kept them up. And I think if they didn't make that change, if they still had Nigel Adkins there, God forbid, in which we put him in the top tier last year, they'd
looking at that now.
I mean, there was a point where we were really worried about Tranmere last season, and he's got them out of that mess. Whether he can continue to build on that is we're obviously yet to see, and hence why we put him in C.
Very fitting, Luke. Well, very fitting.
Right,
there
we go.
No, Matt Sadler. Where do we put him?
We're going to be here for another half an hour, aren't we, discussing this one?
It's
always Matt Sadler. What was it? It was the season. It was the ranking seasons, wasn't it? We spent ages talking about Walsall. We're probably doing the same about Matt Sadler.
I think we put.
I stand by it. Sorry, I stand by it. I think he's lucky to get the job. I really do.
Where did he? I'm trying to find out where we put him. Why? Okay, we put him does a job equivalent of C.
I mean, he wasn't wrong. I mean, they were just very mid-table before that, weren't they?
Yeah, but then
Much, but
they got right.
But we're also
Oh no, it's gonna be another one of these again. Oh no.
From a
season.
managerial perspective, to be at the point they were at and not go up is criminal. And I think the management of the squad was probably poor. We know they like to press high and play this high energy football, but I don't think they rotated their squad all that much. And I think he ran his own team into the ground, and in doing so, kind of just messed up his own team's prospects a little bit. And he's now got them on this sort of downward trajectory. I know he recovered it a little bit by getting to Wembley, but kind of not the point. Still didn't finish off the job. He's had multiple chances there to succeed in a big way, and he's failed both essentially. So I'll go as low as E. I've got to be honest.
It's even then, steady manager within his kind of, not the season just gone, the season prior, steady enough mid-table. Then he has this remarkable season, very similar to Crawley in a way. Nobody expected it. And if you're basing it from the start of that season up until January, midway through January, top of A, you'd even make an own tier for him. You're basing him then from mid-January until the end of the season, you make an own tier for him below E. So
yeah, that's not what he's trying to say.
Yeah, you'd make. I think my argument is, and it's very similar to Luke's. It's phenomenal what he did in that first half of the season. He did everything perfect. He had a team, knew the way he wanted to play. Utilized that squad. Didn't really change too much. They lose a player. They get a few injuries. He then falls into a trap of very similar to some of the managers we mentioned on this list. He just was not versatile enough. If he would have changed a few things just about the way they played, even just the players that were playing on certain games, they would have got over the line. They only needed one more win and they would have been fine.
Being stubborn as a manager is the biggest curse.
That's the thing. He was just very stubborn. It worked for the opening half, and then the final half. Again, you can be very dramatic and say Nathan Lowe's the reason, that they fell off. But I think it's a mixture of many things. Very stubborn manager. And just based on the fact they didn't get promoted, I'm going to say D. I think I'm going to have to say D. I wouldn't go E just because they weren't kind of in that.
I don't think he's as bad as Martin Paterson.
I don't think he's as bad as Martin Paterson, but I don't think you can get. I don't think you can give him credit of the likes of Andy Woodman. You can put him anywhere near that. You can even put him near the likes of Lindsey in terms of the fact that they may not be the greatest managers, but they know what works and they're more than adamant to make changes. He evidently wasn't, and that's how Walsall ended the season how they did.
Yeah, to be fair, I suppose in that regard, it's kind of similar to Lee Bell, really. The fall off, the stubbornness. I feel like whichever category one goes into, the other kind of has to follow.
Yeah. Again, nobody noticed the fall off of Crew because of how bad Walsall's was. And like any other season, Crew's is mentioned.
And like I said, I think they're very lucky that that's happened. Actually, very lucky. But yeah, you look at, we can blame the players, of course. There was a big reason why that, but but eventually the book stops to the manager. We know he's stubborn, and judging by some of the Walsall fans that I've spoken to, a lot of bridges have been burnt with the fan base because of that, and he can't argue. You can't argue, rightly so. He doesn't seem like the most likable bloke either. You hear some of his interviews and some of the stuff he comes out with is like, right, okay, it's my way or the highway. and there's no other alternative to it. And yeah, he's got one hell of a rebuilding job, especially with the fan base that he's got to do there to regain their trust. Because, like I said, I think he's lucky to be in a job. The capitulation, that the fact that they've not gone up from them being so far clear, we were talking 100 points, we were talking records. You know, the fact that they've not even gone up is absolutely criminal. And that'll overshadow any good that they did in the first half of the season, which they were absolutely terrific first half of the season. But because of that, it's a forgotten memory. So I think D is fair. I really do.
Jordan, I think you should be a poet, man. I think you should get into poetry. I feel like that was something that I think that's something that we should quote, and I don't know, put it in a museum, man. That was phenomenal stuff.
Then what was the old anthologies we used to have in school? We get like 20 odd poems. I think we did War and Comfort. I'm blabbering on here. You can tell it we're near the end. You kind of ruined the poetry now, man, unfortunately. Right. Okay. To recap very quickly, I'm not going to go like this, like I did last season, trying to figure out, right, who are you? I'm blaming Jake for that one, for the images that he picked. I picked these images, so there's absolutely zero excuse this time. So E, like I said, I think we do think it's harsh because we haven't seen him, David Hughes, but Martin Paterson is an E. I don't think that's harsh at all. But you know, again, there's only so much you can go off, as he only really had that shot spell as a manager. In D, we've got the Appleton manager's name, I've forgotten his name, John Doolan, that's it. You've also got Mike Flynn in there, Lee Bell, Michael Appleton, and Matt Sadler. In C, Dean Brennan. You've also got the Barrow manager's name in there, in which I forgot Andy Whing. There we go.
Oh no, he's done it again. He's done it again.
You're getting through these very quickly. You sort of forget like half the managers. Right. Also in C, you've got the likes of Neil Harris, Scott Lindsey, Pete Wild, Simon Weaver. I'm cracking under the pressure. Micky Mellon, Ian Holloway, and Andy Crosby. I was trying to see who that was at the end. Yeah, without actually doing that.
Oh, you did the thing again. You look. Oh no!
Like I said, I'm no good at this. In B, you've got Andy Woodman, you've got Danny Cowley, you've got Gareth Ainsworth, you've got David Artell, and you've got Karl Robinson. And in A, you've got Darrell Clarke, you've got Paul Cook, and you've got Paul Warne. Are you happy?
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, if you want to be a good manager, just be called Paul or Darrell.
So what I've done now, Jordan, is we've got another clip where we're gonna recap last season where you try to read these managers, and we're gonna do it again because that was poor.
Right. You know what? You've just given me a good video idea. I'm gonna find the clip that I did last year and sort of compare it with this one. You might see it on social media in the next few days. You'll probably see it.
Oh no, it will not be a probably. I will get on this first thing tomorrow morning. This will be done.
At least you're about tomorrow morning. I'm not. I've got a trip to Rochdale.
Poor thing. Best of luck, man.
Well, the fact that I've got to go to I don't have to go. I've decided to go, but it's also Oasis play in Manchester again tomorrow night. So Manchester's going to be heaving. I'm not looking forward to it. I'm glad we're on it again now. We're already an hour 15 in.
Just end the podcast.
But look, let's put it this way: we've done it. We've not done it in over 2 hours. You know, we've improved. We may have gone over a little.
I think we've half the time.
But we've improved.
Let's have one last gander on the time duration. The first one, 2 hours, 12 minutes. We've cut just about an hour off.
Well, hopefully that means we've improved a little bit. Obviously, let us know. But have we got these right?
Have we got these right? I've just seen a comment from last season's one talking about Graham Alexander, which is another awful thing. We put him in the second highest bracket, even though he got Bradford promoted. And there was a comment mentioning that. So, albeit we're going to have some picks that age absolutely awfully this season, I'm sure. But let us know what you think.
Yeah, let us know. Look, I'm expecting the abuse from Colchester fans. Look, like I said, it's nothing to do with your club. And look, like I said, I've given my plaudits to Danny Kell. I just don't like him. I hate Ian Holloway more. and I've always stood by that. So Swindon fans, you're more than happy to go with me as well. But look, let's end it there. Thank you very much for watching, for listening. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe if you're new. If you're listening to it on Spotify or Apple or whatever, make sure you download the podcast wherever you get it from. Make sure you know in the comments if you agree or disagree with any of these picks. You know, we'd love to know your opinions. There should be a transfer roundup video. I think Jack's doing that, which will probably drop either Sunday or Monday. We'll be back next week with our predictions. Yeah, I know. It's that time again. We've got to do it one way or another. So stay tuned for that. Oh God, it's going to be a nightmare predicting some of these. And that's pretty much it. Yeah. Thank you very much for watching. We'll catch you next time.